I'm delighted to say that today we'll hear from some quite eminent and distinguished speakers. So we'll hear from Claire Maxwell and her colleague Andrea Livesey, and then we're going to hear from Professor Axel Cohn, who's a professor in health and social care at Edge Hill University. After the break, the comfort break, we'll then hear from Kerry Wilson, who's a reader in cultural policy at Liverpool John Moores University, and Professor Laura Makin, who's a professor of social and ethical aspects in health and medicine from Lancaster University. So thank you to our distinguished speakers for giving up your time today and for sharing your research with us. We're delighted to have you here.
Obviously, as Alison said, my name is Claire Maxwell. I'm a reader in maternal infant health. I'm a subject lead for public and allied health at Liverpool John Moores University. And my collaboration with Andrea started about 3 years ago, didn't it? 2 or 3 years ago. And it's gone from strength to strength. And Andrea, and it's quite an unusual collaboration, obviously, between history and midwifery. But I think I think people have queried or questioned that sort of collaboration in terms of improving maternal and infant health outcomes. However, I think we can persuade you after this presentation that it is a really important collaboration, and looking back to history in terms of what's happening now can be really useful in impacting maternal and infant health. So just hand you over to Andrea.
Hi everyone, so it's great to be with you here today, and thank you to Claire for inviting me to come along to speak with her. So I'm senior lecturer in the history of slavery at Liverpool John Moores University. Obviously my specialism is as a historian. I'm a historian of enslavement, but also development of ideas of race. So within that, I'm particularly interested in the experiences of enslaved women and how voices have traditionally been excluded from the archival record. So by that, we mean whose voices were recorded, whose voices were given respect within certain spaces enough to make it into what we call the archival record, the archives that historians use. So I'll go into that a little bit today, but that really has formed the centre of the project that we'll be speaking about. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the Black Maternal Health and History Project. So this has multiple elements. Like Claire said, this project has been great in that it really just has gone from strength to strength. And over time, we've expanded, other people have come on board. So if we kind of move all over the place, forgive us a little bit, because there has been a lot that's been going on. But at the core, the Black Maternal Health and History Project was conceived as a long-term project to engage local Black communities in historical research and to imagine alternative approaches to confront the Black maternal health outcome gap. So our project was funded by the British Academy and Liverpool John Moores University. And as I said, it has brought together a range of partners. So from museum curators at the International Slavery Museum, part of National Museums Liverpool, creative arts therapists, and writers from Collective Encounters. Now, Collective Encounters are a theatre for social change based in Liverpool, and they specialise in working with communities and developing community voices for advocacy. And of course, we've had involved student historians and student midwives, and Claire will be able to tell you a little bit more about that soon. First, as a historian, of course, I will lead with the historical research. I'll tell you a little bit about the work that I do. So, as I said, I'm a historian of enslavement. I'm particularly interested in women's voices. So a few years ago, I visited this former plantation that's now owned by the National Park Service. So this is called Oakland Plantation. It's in Natchitoches, or just outside of Natchitoches, which is a small town in the northwest of Louisiana. If you've ever seen the film Steel Magnolias with Dolly Parton, that's the town So it's very small, very rural. This plantation is completely out of the way, but it's now owned by the National Park Service. So when I walked into this former plantation home, to the left, I saw a photograph, and it's the photograph you see here. Accompanying this photograph was a handwritten note from the original owner of the photograph, and it said, Granny Marie, aged 104, died 1935, grannied 7 of my mother's children. Now we know that the term granny was associated with midwives, granny midwives, and these were women who had no formal medical training, but drew upon ancestral knowledge that had been passed on between communities on how to look after the health of pregnant women. So obviously, I went to ask the park rangers that were there, more about this story. Who was this woman? What do you know? And the answer was that they didn't have any information on her. So that's kind of where this project started. We wanted to know more about the woman who was solely known as Granny Marie. We now know that her name was Marie Hoover, what her life was like, what her practices were, and what contribution she made to the women. We wanted to find that voice, and I think the women who were working with us on the project did a pretty good job of doing that. I'm also particularly interested in folklore, so I have a book on folklore coming out later this year. And this is the type of material that we're dealing with. Now, as historians, we so often just deal with fragments of information. So information that makes it into the archive is incomplete. And this is just an example of the type of thing that we're faced with. Completely out of context, no understanding who said it, where it came from. But we have a sheet here on birth customs. We know that this was collected in the 1930s, predominantly by white interviewers working for the government who were going into communities, Black communities, and asking them for knowledge and folklore. Until a baby's navel string comes off, no man should be allowed in the room. If they do, it makes a sickly child. So we're interested in this kind of material. And this is the type of thing that was recorded almost for entertainment. But what we want to do is think about, okay, well, what's the meaning behind this? Why did this belief come about? So it's working with these small fragments of information and trying to access that knowledge from the past. But of course, we have a very targeted challenge, and the intentionality of this project is something that really is kind of at the heart and is the strength of the project. So we know that there are local issues. So this report came out last year, a coroner's report that pointed to ethnic bias in delayed care, excuse me, that led to a Black woman's death and the death of an infant at Liverpool Women's Hospital. We know about the national statistics on Black maternal mortality. So the data brief that came out earlier this year showed Black women are still twice as likely to die from childbirth and in the surrounding period than white women. Now this is a slight improvement on previous years, but of course still far too high. And we know that there's an international issue here. So as Claire mentioned, I'm in Costa Rica now. I haven't seen any of it so far. I've just been in the hotel, but I'm actually with the UN Population Fund. And what's great about the UN Population Fund is that they're interested in sexual and reproductive health of Black women and girls, but they are also looking at how we've got to this point, which is why I'm here as a historian, talking to them about this long history of medical and obstetric violence. It was important that this project was done as ethically as possible. Of course, for that, you need funding. So we, as I said, we were partially funded by the British Academy, SHAPE Impact and Engagement Fund. And we were also supported by Liverpool John Moores University, who continue to support us with smaller elements related to this project. Our partners, I've already mentioned, we've got National Museums Liverpool, Collective Encounters. We've also got the National Park Service in the United States. We've been working with them to kind of access the voices of the enslaved people that lived there. But we've also made significant links with Liverpool Women's Hospital, and I'll go into that in a moment. So first of all, we wanted to understand diasporic identity in the negotiation of maternal health. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Well, we're working in Liverpool. We know that Liverpool's Black population is the oldest and most continuously located Black population in Europe. But we also know that this population has a significant diasporic identity. There's always conversations with elsewhere in the Black diaspora, particularly areas of the British Caribbean, but also for a number of historical reasons that I don't have time to go into right now, the United States. So we want to understand the impact of that diasporic identity. We want to understand the long history of community-based Black maternal healthcare practice within that diaspora. So we want to think about what was going on in Liverpool, but also what's going on in these diasporic spaces, Louisiana, for example, or the British Caribbean, and the differences and similarities. And we want to know about those different practices. We also want to develop methodologies for empowering women to use their voices for advocacy in their own community. So it was important for us that this project wasn't discrete, that it also continues to go on to make an impact after we finished. So we had 7 workshops with local women. The funding primarily went towards paying these women for their time and their expertise. Our trauma-informed creative methodology meant that women were able to talk about their experiences, but also through the creative activities, which included letter writing, poetry, art. They were able to process that in a way that didn't re-traumatize. And central to that was Michelle Richards, who's a creative arts therapist. In those sessions, we explored historical material, both from my research, but also from the collections of the International Slavery Museum. So, outcomes from this, first of all, heritage. In 2028, the International Slavery Museum will reopen. It's closed at the moment for a huge renovation. And the work that the women did in the workshops, reimagining these experiences, will form a central part of an exhibition on Black maternal health. And the work on Marie Hoover, Granny Marie, we then found out she was called Marie Hoover through further archival research, will be going into this former slave cabin on Oakland Plantation in Louisiana. So through this, we will both be raising awareness of what's happened in the past, but also making those links to current maternal health care to raise awareness of the issues. So when the women in the workshops were exploring the material, one of the key themes that came out of that historical archive material was kind of community support. So in the workshops, the women were really keen to do something for their own communities. So we worked with them to produce this leaflet for Liverpool Women's Hospital to be given to new Black mothers. Now, it contains a supportive message on the front of the leaflet, and on the middle pages, we kind of drew out key points from the conversations that we'd had in those workshops about their own birth experiences. Again, these were all trauma-informed discussions to be able to give the messages to new Black mothers that the women in our workshops thought they needed to be given. Okay, so there's a number of different outcomes that I don't have time to go into here. But what was really useful for us was kind of developing this methodology, working with communities to be able to fill in those archival silences. And from that, we're able to learn from the past. Claire will talk to you about our midwifery decolonisation project. Of course, we've got that Hey Mama leaflet that I've just mentioned. We also tested partnerships for a significant new Welcome Discovery application. So we have a really strong project team for that. But I think I'll end my part of the talk with the community trust and awareness that we've managed to raise. And I've got a quote from one of our participants here. This project and space has been so important for me personally without me even knowing I needed it, and will be so important for and to other women. Proud of everything we collectively felt, shared and achieved in those short hours. Powerful. Okay, and I'll hand over to Claire now.
So the LGMU Mystery or Midwifery History Project, the aim of this was to explore links between historical narratives derived from transatlantic slavery, as Andrea has pointed out, and the current outcomes of Black women in maternity services. And we wanted to do this within the context of decolonising the current midwifery education provision here at LJMU. So we applied for a student internship curriculum development grant. They come out, I think it's twice a year, and we receive £5,000 for that. And we set about developing an interdisciplinary student internship, quite a novel collaboration between midwifery and history undergraduate students. They were across from all 3 years, first, second and the third, and we had 2 from each, and they were on a paid internship, and that was over 6 months. So we asked for expressions of interest, and then we did actually interview because we had more people who applied than we needed. They were quite keen to be involved, and from different varying ethnicities as well. And yeah, so we appointed 4 student midwives. Okay, so the method, we used focus groups, and we explored existing knowledge around transatlantic slavery and midwifery and Black reproductive health, narratives around Black maternal health that may be derived from transatlantic slavery, and links to current narratives and Black maternal health outcomes in the UK. So we incorporated historical sources in this, so Sims Speculum, Granny Marie, and Embrace statistics to try to guide the focus groups. Myself and Andrea oversaw this. We sort of, with long arm supervision really, because they were intern-led face-to-face audio recorded focus groups. So we did some sort of methodological training around undertaking focus groups and also data analysis, etc. So it was very much led by our students, which you can see there. And we did 3 focus groups. Well, the students led 3 focus groups. So there were 16 in groups 1 and 2. They were student midwives, and then group 3 history students. And then Olga, you can see maybe on the picture there, who's a Black midwifery student, suggested that we have a safe space focus group, and that was just for Black student midwives who wanted to take part in that, and there was 2 who undertook that, and that was really useful. Olga got a lot out of that actually. Data analysis, the students led a 6-stage thematic analysis, Braun and Clark, and myself and Andrea sort of worked with them to undertake that, because this was all very new to them, but you know, they developed skills for future research as well. And the findings, there was a really strong consensus that incorporating historical sources were of benefit to providing context to Black women's experiences in maternity care today. So the students could really see that those historical narratives were very pertinent in terms of narratives that were used day in, day out in clinical practice. And it was really good for them to understand where they came from, and that context around them, and also sort of the mythology around it as well. And there were three main overarching themes. Representation, so gaps were noted around Black culture, and there was a lack of representation from global majority lecturers and speakers, and students were overwhelmingly willing to learn around Black culture. And they very much felt that it should be across all 3 years, that it wasn't strong enough. The majority of our students here at LJMU are white ethnicity, and some of them actually said that they'd had very little contact, even though they were living in Liverpool, with different ethnic groups all the way through growing up. And another theme was recognition, and this was recognition of the link between historical narratives and Black maternal health outcomes. So, you know, Black women don't feel pain, all Black women breastfeed, etc. This was very limited, and it really opened the students' eyes, as was the role that Black enslaved midwives like Granny Marie had on reproductive health, and that's very much around the white-centric sort of textbooks and journal articles, etc., and the curriculum in general around midwifery in the UK. And also another quite important theme was confidence. There was real anxiety amongst the students around discussions on race due to this lack of awareness. Some felt very ill-educated, if you like. They didn't feel very confident. They talked about feeling very anxious, uncomfortable, not knowing what the right terminology was to use, feeling quite confused. But also there was a real curiosity. The students felt very willing to close this gap in terms of their education and their knowledge and their confidence. And they knew it was a barrier, and they also knew that it can impact the care that they gave in practice. So just about the impact, which obviously is the most important part of this. So I've sort of themed it. So in terms of representation, here you can see two of our wonderful Black midwives who now teach on the midwifery programme. So we've got Kezia Powell from the Anti-Racism Hub at Liverpool Women's Hospital, and she's also contributed to our curriculum, and also Keely Grindley, who's an EDI lead at Leighton. Brilliant a resource now for our programme, and they are, you know, mapped in for every year. And we've also got a further collaboration with LWH's Anti-Racism Hub. We're going to set up a summer school to try and recruit would-be student midwives from Liverpool 8, where there's a high ethnicity. Also developing resources for teaching. So Liverpool Women's have shared some with us in terms of cannulation, little films that they've made on darker skins, and venipuncture. And we have Olga, who is one of our students on this project. She now attends to discuss her role as a newly qualified midwife. She's our alumni. In terms of recognition, we have lectures from Andrea and colleagues from the LJMU History Department to give this real understanding and recognition around the impact of Black midwives on the midwifery profession, and around transatlantic slavery, and these Black reproductive health narratives, and where they've come, where they're derived from, and sort of the mythology around them. And importantly, we've also started a safe space to discuss race approach. This very much came from the confidence element of the themes, and this is throughout the programme. So it's very much about openness and transparency around lack of knowledge. Keely and Kezia will immediately say, if you don't know what to say, or if you don't know what the terminology is, it doesn't matter, just ask the question. That's what they want. They want the questions asked. They don't want to fear in terms of students not really feeling confident enough to maybe say the wrong thing, and that came out quite strongly as well. Thank you very much, and if you've got any questions, myself and Andrea obviously are here to answer them.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Andrea. I think that was really good, how past is pertinent to current sort of maternal health and practice. And there's some fantastic impacts in terms of your recruitment of midwives and improvements in teaching and yeah, a lot in terms of representation, recognition and confidence. When's your book coming out, Andrea?
It's in September.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Oh, we do have a question. Yeah, would you like to ask a question?
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, my name is Mustafa. I'm so sorry. I'm late. But I was so interested I was also interested in attending this program. Because I'm currently working on maternal mortality back in Sierra Leone, although I'm based in the UK. I just completed my degree, but it's something that I'm very much interested in working on. So I would have loved to to be here very early and learn much about you guys what you've done, because I am trying to reduce maternal mortality in Sierra Leone using a tech-based solution. So I've developed a software that will monitor, predict, analyze, and suggest critical indications that actually will affect mothers during their gestation period. Yeah, there's a possibility maybe to further extend connections, so maybe share my work, or if you guys are interested in platform to share what I'm doing, maybe connection there, and that should be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to put your details in the chat, and then
Yeah.
we can connect you with Andrea and Claire?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we better move on to the next presentation, which is Axel Cohn.
Thank you so much. First of all, thanks very much for the invitation. It's been real. Well, it's great to be here, and I think we're changing tack a slightly bit, or as Monty Python said, no, for something completely different. So I think we're coming from a really fascinating topic around midwifery and decolonizing the curriculum to AI. There might be some bridges there, but I can't think of anything. I'm so sorry. So I'm just going to crack on. Thanks very much for the wonderful invitation. Thanks very much to Alison, of course, Isla as well. This is going to be about AI and impact. We're trying to make it a bit interactive, so stay close to your keyboards if possible, if that's all right. So let's crack on. So this presentation is very much about transforming professional roles in health research, but it could be also, you might not be in health research, you might be in other parts of research. So it's fairly generic. And just about myself briefly, Director of Healthcare Analytics, UK Limited. We're a company undertaking data analysis for NHS hospital trusts and other large providers in the UK and England mostly, and also Professor of Health Services Research at the Medical School at Edgehill University. If you're asking yourself, where's Edgehill University? It is in Lancashire, just outside Liverpool, and I'm sure many of you know our wonderful, beautiful campus already. Now, I also have various editorial roles, one large international journal, Journal of Health Organization Management, and one smaller journal, Journal of Integrated Care. And I will talk briefly later on about AI and publication, so stay tuned. We're going to talk briefly about that at the very end as well. Okay, aims of the session. The aim is really to introduce you and everybody else to how maybe have a conversation around how AI might be influencing the professional roles and particularly tasks. So I'll come to that in a minute, but we want to also explore practical examples from across the research cycle. And I'm going to focus on two examples. I'm going to show you something, what AI can do or cannot do into particular areas of research. And of course, we want to have a bit of a discussion about the benefits and risks. So stay tuned and also stay close to the keyboard. We're going to have a bit of interaction there, hopefully. Okay, let me see if I can move this on. Yes. Now, first of all, it's really important to understand what we mean by impact, and where this could be an impact on the academic work, on the task, but it could also be on the various tools and instruments we're using, but it could also be on the conceptual work that we're doing on a daily basis. Most of us will probably be very aware of the capacity building. I can tell you that I have been very aware of that. I shifted all my team and the medics at the medical, our evaluation unit, as well as in the company, to AI-based task completion. And I can tell you the gain, the efficiency gain is enormous. So if you looked at, let's say, a researcher doing analysis, qualitative thematic analysis, of, let's say, 500 pages of transcripts that may have taken 1-2 days. Now it takes about 5 to 6 minutes. So however you do it, the most sort of like striking impact is really in capacity building. And of course, that has implications for roles and tasks and role distribution across our teams. So we're going to talk about roles and tasks today. This is going to be the most focus, or this is our focus for today, and it is all linked to the research, throughout the research task. Now, this is something I just put in a little table. Look at what we can do now and where it already has an impact. So let's look at a couple of tasks. I just selected some. So evidence synthesis. We all do evidence synthesis. We go into our catalogs, library bibliographic catalogs. We're trying to find the literature, the evidence that is already out there and already published. And we used to do manual screening, data extraction, etc. I'm going to show you a little example in a minute. LLMs are doing this now for rapid review and also for several other tasks. And there's good evidence, and Cochrane of course already sort of like tested this. And we have good evidence that LLMs, as well as natural language processing, which are different processes, of course, very important to keep them apart. Natural language processing is quite good at this. By the way, natural language processing has, of course, been in PubMed, in the PubMed catalog and other catalogs for many, many years. So whether we know it or we don't, whether or not we know it, in fact, AI has been with us for many years already, even before large language models came onto the market. In any case, we're going to also look at data analysis later on a bit. So let's and how that actually can support us. And I give you one example. We're racing through. I am conscious of time, so apologies for the sort of racing through. But if there are any questions, please do have a little write on the chat in the chat box. Right. Okay. What do you think the impact of AI on your work might be? So I gave you a couple of examples, but maybe rephrase this question. What do you think the impact of AI has already been on your work? Where are you using maybe AI? Can I have a bit of your views on this in the chat box, please? So any ideas? Where have you come across AI? Where are you using AI currently? And AI is, of course, it's a large umbrella term. So this might be natural language processing. You have that in your phone. You've had that in a phone for many, many years, in fact. But also large language models. So anything that's coming to mind. So fantastic. Claire is using it to develop evaluations, curriculum design, data analysis. Brilliant. Okay, that's actually the whole panoply already. So that's really interesting. We're very similar there, Claire, and maybe we shouldn't shout about this apparently. And of course, we're trying to keep students away from it as well at the same time. Really interesting. Transcription of interviews in real time, really interesting, Phoebe. That's also very fascinating. We are doing now workshops where we are recording the voices and feeding it automatically in. Now, if you think this is very innovative, in fact, it's not. In fact, medics and nurses are doing this already. They are doing scenario testing, feeding this, putting simply the AI on in the background, and then they're asking the AI to actually assess their performance through scenario testing in order to prepare for exams. So all of this is really, really taking off. This is going so fast. Great. Okay, a couple of things. Helping students who write assignments passed off as well. All right. Okay. maybe not. Interesting enough, I think it's still, of course, they're coming through now. Many assessments written by AI. I find them still easy to spot. Because they lack originality, they lack a personal voice, etc., etc. Students are not sharp enough yet to kind of like use AI, to instruct AI to use their own voice, to kind of like make it appear a bit like it's actually manually written. But it will become more and more difficult. Absolutely. Great, interesting, really. So I can see summarizing evidence as notes. Let's go to that. I think it's Claire. Claire said that. So let's go to that. Let me show you one example. So we will have, this is roughly what we are looking at. We're looking at really various shifts in our task. There's the technical to the strategic. So we're becoming really curators rather than doers, supervisors of the AI-generated content. Yes, it is. We're moving from silo to interdisciplinary. That is, of course, something we wanted to do for a long, long time, and many of us have done interdisciplinary research. But it's also that we now need to develop the skills to understand the other sort of like the other side and the other disciplines, simply because AI demands integration of the various domains, informatics, ethics, but also domain knowledges, various domain knowledges. So you need to know a bit what you're doing, and I'll come to an example in a minute. But also we need to move from reactive to anticipatory. And I have some neighbors shouting just now. This is Liverpool, so I'm just going to close my window. Okay, here we go. Greater capacity for forecasting and modeling scenarios. This is fascinating, of course, for theory building and then theory testing. And that can be qualitative as well as quantitative. So interesting enough. So let's look at this. Example one, synthesis, evidence synthesis. Many of you suggested, or many of you have done this probably. So this is an app that you can download, but you can also just simply access on the web. And it's consensus. There are many other apps now they're heavily invested into, and they are basically simulating the evidence synthesis process. We're not going to go into detail what the evidence synthesis process is, but as you know, many of you know, it's a simple search, then it's after the search, it's an abstract screening, it's a title screening, etc., etc., and then eventually a synthesis of the available evidence. Now look what's happening here. So this is an app that basically bundles all these tasks together and then produces a synthesis. Now, how does it do this? It uses natural language processing and large language models, and it's plugged into OpenAI, which is the AI solution that we have here in the West. Of course, there are others. There's Gemini. There's also a Chinese model, but this is using the OpenAI. So let's just see. So, for example, children's cancer. I'm checking health related, but could be anything else. Children's cancer and population health. Let's see what comes up. So what it basically does now, it actually screens the PubMed catalog, which is the largest catalog of all medical research, and it basically is trying to find various relevant published evidence, published papers, and on top of that, it gives me the results. Of course, those 18 papers, you've probably seen this already. Here's one query, is 10 sources, as one search. And it gives me those 10 papers, and I can, of course, also go into those 10 papers, and I can look at the evidence. So what is actually in those 10 papers? I can look into this here. You probably see this on my screen, but it also gives me a brief synthesis. So you can see synthesis with the various citations here in the text. Now, that is, of course, absolutely extraordinary thing that they can do. They combine this now as I think about this. They're screening the papers, abstract and title screening, and full text screening, and providing a synthesis in only a few seconds. Now we try to replicate that in a research study for the Health Foundation. And we actually were a bit earlier than consensus. We kind of like, but we used with technicians, computer scientists, and others to do this. And so we actually produced a theme synthesis of funded research, a report for the Health Foundation. So you can see that report here. You can download it. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. Now, why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because it's actually quite difficult, and we failed. So what is really important and fascinating here is whatever you do, the complexities around using large language models and natural language processing and modeling a highly complex series of tasks is actually still defeating us as normal academics and also as normal computer scientists. But some companies have now basically cracked that and and you can read in the report why it was so difficult. I shared that in the chat box. You can have a look at it. It's a lengthy report, but you can go to the recommendations in the summary, of course, as well. So evidence synthesis is a complex task, but they have actually managed to bring that together in AI. And I can tell you that consensus now also is being subscribed by most American universities, Harvard and others, also investing in this, several millions of dollars into this, actually to bring it forward. So they're really embracing this. We probably need to embrace this as well. There are some other programs already out there, so there are parallel. So this is not to market consensus here or to promote consensus in any way. This was example number one. And if evidence synthesis, if we are relieved in inverted commas of the evidence synthesis task, then the question is, what else do we do? If we all of a sudden have all this capacity and we don't need research assistants anymore. Well, we do need them, but they may not do the abstract screening anymore and the title screening, etc. So they have free time now, spare time. So what do we do with them? Well, I think in health, what we are looking at now, and you can see this here on the screen, we're looking at some fascinating developments. We're looking at how we can actually use our capacity now in far more complex health data analysis, identifying trends and predict outbreaks. So that's modeling. That's a sort of thing we had to do manually once all the other tasks had been completed. Now we can think about this, and we have spare time. We can also do monitoring visualization of healthcare service performance metrics. This is fascinating. This is something we can do now online. We can do real time. We can produce dashboards, and many of the NHS ICBs have also done this already. And we can do, of course, we can use AIs and algorithms to do stratification, outcome prediction. Now, I know this is very health related and medical services related, but of course, many of these things can also be done in qualitative analysis and qualitative research projects. And I'm going to show you one thing now, hopefully that we can develop. So this is something that is something that we do now on a regular basis. We are evaluators, my company as well as the unit I run. We're evaluating complex programs, and for complex programs, we need really a bit of a logic model, or maybe some people also want to have a theory of change. Now, many of you probably are familiar with that, so I'm not going to go into logic model. They've been a mandatory requirement for most local authority programs now and interventions and projects now for many, many years. Logic model, if you haven't heard of this, and just type it into Google and you will see it's very protocol-led, it's very, very structured, so it's relatively simple to kind of do that. But what you have to do in order to produce a logic model, you have to actually get the data, the information from your program stakeholders. So you're interviewing them, or you are running a workshop, as Claire did, workshop with nurses, and then you kind of, or midwives, and then you kind of like trying to get that transcript and going through the transcript and say, what are the elements and components of a logic model? Now, I want to show you something briefly, just what AI can do. I have prepared this a bit, so I've been cheating a bit because so this is something that I've done earlier on. You can see my ChatGPT here. This is a very basic ChatGPT 4.0. It's publicly available. You can use this. Of course, you can also use simply Copilot, which is built into your Edge browser, which is Microsoft, so you don't need to subscribe to anything. So what I've done here is I've had a transcript from a logic model workshop for a particular project that we're doing. It's a large project in public health. And I said, I would like to repeat the logic model development, which we did earlier. So what the AI is doing now, it's going over the transcript. This is a conversation, a workshop conversation, and is trying to tease out what the stakeholders in that workshop thought are the various components of a logic model. And the components are set, so they're structured. So it's like about assumptions, inputs, outputs, outcomes, like short and long-term, medium and long-term outcomes. So let's see what it does. So it does this here now. So hopefully this is a demonstration kind of, hopefully we get that. Here we go. So a generic demonstration of the version of the logic model would be this. So it basically creates a table now with the results in the example contents demonstration version, we call it here. Okay, so that would be my output, my logic model. And of course, yes, can you please? It asks me, okay, yes, can you please produce this as a visual table? And let's see what it comes up. Now, interestingly enough, it can actually also do this as a theory of change model. So I'm going to come to this in a minute, but it might take a little bit here. So this is actually something that we can see. This is the logic model. So let's see if we can actually open that up. But I also want to just show you, can you please produce a theory of change diagram for this as well? Let's see what it comes up in. In the meantime, I'm going to stop sharing and show you the other. Okay, so this is really fascinating because this is a novel development that is now taking place. Theory of changes are quite important now, and they're linked nicely into so-called cyclic diagrams as well. You may have heard of the work of Judea Pearl, the work that he's published over the last 10-15 years, really, where they try to basically find out which of the components in an intervention or in a program are producing what. As it were. So the book is called The Book of Why. You can get that by published by Penguin, and it's really fascinating read. And this is where evaluations now going. And this is all qualitative data, by the way. This is not quant data. This is all qualitative data. And this is one of the first steps. A theory of change is the first step. It's not a DAG, what we call an acyclic graph yet, but it is a first step towards this. And so this is really what we need to do. This is the type of work and task we need to do now to interpret this once AI has set us free from some of the more laborious kind of like interpretation analysis task. And so this is quite fascinating for me because it means that I can now do the more complex work and also the more developmental work and more sophisticated work than before. Okay. I'm going to come back to this. I'm just going to go briefly, just a couple of questions that will concern my most of review publications obsolete. Interesting? No, I don't think so. Review publications are still a much more stringent protocol than consensus. Remember, consensus really produces just very, very short paragraphs. So really interesting. It fills another gap. It doesn't fill the gap of the meta-analyses and reviews, large review for reviews and systematic reviews of reviews, etc. It fills a gap where people want to just have brief synthesis of what is being published in a particular area. So a really interesting question, Claire. Yeah, where are the downsides of learning on consensus compared to synthesize in this context? Well, we come to the downsides maybe in a minute. I've just got to drive that on, but really interesting question. You're absolutely right, Helen. And Ega says, what quality control do you suggest from my personal experience? Its output is really good. Interesting, Ega. This is really fascinating. So you may have noticed I actually didn't start on a blank sheet with AI. And the reason for that is AI is like a person. So if you are, and we do training sessions for data analysis, and I'm going to point you in the right direction later on. And the first thing I always say to those who are attending the training sessions is, imagine you're meeting somebody on the street. and it's a friend of yours or relative or so, and the person starts a conversation and says, "Oh, hi, how are you doing? You know, great one else." And then he or she says, "You know, I've been really disappointed about this." And the first question you might have is, well, what are you referring to? And this is really important insight. AI is the same. You have to provide information and context so it understands you, what you're actually after. Okay, it's the same to human conversation. If you don't provide context, then it produces something which you may think is relevant because it has to come back with an answer. It cannot just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't understand you. Thank you very much. Goodbye." So it has to come back in an answer. So what you were referring to as riddled with errors and nonsense is actually a misunderstanding of the context and the information it needs to produce something accurate. And that is the same for human beings, human to human conversation. So AI is in fact a learning platform. It assumed that it knows nothing. Okay. And the other thing I always say in the training sessions as well, do not think AI is a knowledge repository. It's not a Google. So it doesn't actually produce a finding or something on a pertinent question. So if you're saying what is the date of birth of Giacomo Puccini, it might come back with the right answer, but it may not. And actually, that isn't the purpose of the AI large language model. That's what you use Google for. And Google works differently, by the way. Large language models are learning platforms. Learning platforms are platforms that learn with you what you're after, similar to a conversation, and then it actually highlights and brings back what is relevant to the context. And as I said, I prompted it a bit, I prepared it, I prepped it a bit, and in fact, this can go on for a while. So it's very, very important. It's a really important question. AI is not a factual kind of like a fact check or a knowledge repository. It's a learning platform. It learns with you and gets better as you providing more information, more contextual information, and more other information what you're after, which part of you could be supported. Now we're running a bit like short on time, but so let's move to this one. We talked already about the risk. I want to hear from you some ideas. I want to hear what you think the risk and note the second part, changes to responsibilities, and that's about accountability as well. So what do you think could be, given the two examples I already showed you, what could be the risk of using AI? I would love to hear from you. So back to the keys. If you have any ideas, it would be great to hear. In the meantime, I'm going to take Joan's, I think, or Matthäus, a comment here. I know you mentioned that you would cover AI publication, but I would like to check what responsibility the researcher have when incorporating AI tools into their work. We'll come to that. Absolutely. Great question. And that's definitely something we need to bear in mind. So any risk or change to responsibilities, accountability, think about the lines of accountability. Absolutely, Joanna. I think we would lose. It's de-skilling, isn't it? I completely agree with you. It's about de-skilling. It's of course also skilling up. It's new skills we are learning, but it's also de-skilling. Interesting enough, this is the motorcycle kind of like example that many people quote. We used to be able to kind of like disassemble our motorcycles or our cars and then put them back together. You know, things were easier when we were kids or youngsters. Now, we don't do that anymore. We don't do the cars either. You know, it's far too complex. They're far too complex machinery. And here it's the same. We are actually now disinvesting ourselves from particular task, manual task, and we are it's sort of like automating those tasks, and it's a huge risk, and we need to of course provide supervision to that, and we need to have oversight over that. Copyright, yes, let's look at the copyright in a minute. Very interesting. Make mistakes, so if they really are helping. Gillian, I come back to this. We need to understand what mistake actually means. Research assistants make mistakes. It's very important to define clearly what mistakes are. It's very important because Cochrane did some really interesting work around this. They're a large provider, of course, of systematic reviews. And they found that the accuracy rate of AIs is slightly higher than humans. But here is the snag. We don't know how good humans are. So yes, we can demonstrate in a head-to-head comparison that AI is slightly better than humans. But of course, we do know that humans make mistakes, and so AI makes mistakes. But the important thing here is to define what counts as a mistake. If it is insufficient information and contextual information we give to our research assistant, then the research assistant will probably produce a lot of nonsense. Or, as statistician says, garbage in, garbage out. So if we have poor data, we probably get poor results. But the important thing here is that this is pretty much mirrored also in human-to-human interaction. So it's really important that we are defining that. And of course, Andrea, yeah, it has a potential to widen racial inequalities. AI has been trying to materialize this way. Interesting, very interesting. We used to have some hallucinations, and we used to have also very, very poor results from Gemini, not so much from OpenAI. And of course, we can rectify that. What I would say is that the AI is just as just as discriminatory, or just as just as discriminatory as we are as humans. And you're absolutely right, Andrea. The key here is we're feeding in what we have produced over the last decades and centuries. So if there are discriminatory practices there, they are being reflected and echoed back to us. Interesting enough, it's easier to rectify that with AI than actually with humans. With humans, it takes training, etc., etc. With AI, it's relatively easy, and OpenAI have done a lot of work around this, of course. Great. Okay, now I want to move on. I'm just going to summarize this briefly because we have so little time, but I want to move on. Yes, we have a real skilling issue. We have a real de-skilling issue. You know that with a potential loss here. We're also looking at a bias. You already mentioned that. We're looking at reproducibility, really important at the moment. It's like a black box. We have a Python code, of course, but it is a black box. And we have changing notions of authorship and ownership. You already hinted at legal and ethical issues as well. So really fascinating. You really summarized it well there. Good. Okay, now let's move on. Transparency of AI approach, that is at the heart of the publication issue as well. So at the moment, we don't know how AI produces its results. That's the argument. However, we also know that we don't know how humans produce their results. If you're saying, for example, well, our researcher, when they did the coding, is actually clearly coding this up, that's not how they produce the results. That's just the protocol work. The coding is clear, and for humans as well as for AI, we know what they code at what stage. What is not clear, the decision and judgment that sits behind the coding. And that's exactly the same for humans as well. We don't know, and here we come back to the biases. We do know that humans, of course, are applying subconsciously very often, implicitly, their own biases. And so does AI, because AI is modeled on us. So really interesting and really pertinent also to the question that Andrea raised earlier. Okay. But we do have some sort of semi-transparency. I'm not going to go into that. These are the Python codes that stand behind it. We don't need to look at that. Let's look at guidance for AI. There's good guidance out there. I'm not going to go into details, but it is important that we are now structuring and writing down protocols for the use of AI in research. There are some really interesting protocols already emerging for medical research, but also for health-related research, and I'm sure also in other types of research. Okay, let's look at publishing and authorship. So I've chosen two things here. Two examples. One is from MRL Publishing Author Guidelines. MRL is the fifth largest publisher of academic material. And I'm going to go also to BMJ in a minute, the British Medical Journal. So at the moment, the MRL, interestingly, takes a very strict approach. Any copywriting of an article using generative AI tool would not be permissible. So that's clear. But it's also interesting that they're saying the generation or reporting of results, that could be data analysis, is not permissible. So they are taking a very hard line. NIHR, for example, and some of the research councils in England also take a hard line at the moment, but they have already been watering it down a bit. The problem is it's hard to police. How do we police that? How do we know a table has been produced by AI? And also, of course, previously, let's say, quantitative data analysis or in vivo, a quantitative analysis, of course, you can put it through SPSS, and that is an automated tool, regardless whether it has AI or not. And Vivo and Atlas TI, now, if you're qualitative research, is the same. And Vivo now has finally also AI inbuilt. You can't disentangle it anymore. So AI is already working for you there. And Atlas TI have been, of course, vanguard in this already. They had AI built in for a long time now. So you can't actually disentangle it anymore, which presents a real problem for you as an author when you're trying to publish this, for at least in MRL journals. Now, British Medical Research, interestingly, is not as strict. They are saying, well, we will consider content by AI technology use if it's transparent. And so you need to demonstrate what you've done with AI using the Python code and others. And then we expect our authors and others who are creating content to any content with to disclose and describe the use of AI technologies. We have a couple of papers in review at the moment where we used AI, and we are waiting at the results. Okay. So really fascinating, different approaches. And I just want to say thank you for listening. You can follow me, of course, on LinkedIn. Please do that, because we are providing training on data analysis, qualitative and quantitative data analysis. And then I have a cheap plug as well. This is a handbook's coming out soon. We're waiting in the next 25 days, really. The handbook is a handbook that you can check out. It's on Amazon. And it's the first handbook of health services evaluation ever to be published, with over 30 chapters, over 70 international authors. Really proud of that. So look out for that. And of course, hopefully buy one. You know, it costs a couple of hundreds only. You know, so hundreds of pounds. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that was useful. So.
Thank you so much, Axel. Axel usually covers all of this in a day, so that was a real whistle stop tour. So thank you very much for that. And I've attended one of his workshops, and they're very, very good and very interactive. And I'd really encourage people to attend one of his workshops, and of course read some of his papers and his book coming out.
Thank you. Thanks, Alison, for your support. Thank you.
We've had a lot of questions in the chat as we've been going along, but Axel's been dealing with most of those. I don't know if there's any other questions.
I do want to just say, apologies for one say, there's a really interesting question from Tanzin. I always considered qualitative data analysis, but also the writing process, as a bit of an art. And I like to see that art coming through also the writing. The personal voice, as it were. And I really miss that myself, I have to say. We are losing also the magic, as it were, of creative work, because any research is also creative to some extent, and that is my regret in this all, of course, you know. But I just want to say, so I really feel you, Tanzin. It's something I feel as well.
Thank you. I think Claire's got her hand up. Claire Maxwell.
What's coming next, Axel? Do you predict?
I think we see a growing sophistication and replacement of some of the repetitive tasks. So there will be some, especially around reviews, systematic reviews, meta-analysis already done by AI, etc. It's so difficult to look into the future. But I think what we really move, and what is also pretty much endangered, I think, in the future is the repetitive work and task of research assistants. I think the role of research assistants will change. Maybe for the better, because many of our research assistants now have a PhD, so they are very, very highly trained and skilled anyway. But they're moving out, I think, out of the highly repetitive task and into more sophisticated kind of modeling, etc., and interpretation. So that's probably something we need to be aware of also in training and also in terms of career development, if that makes sense, Claire.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any other. Oh, there's another hand up. Yes.
Thanks, Alison.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Axel, for that. I think this is just an ask for you. Once your papers are published, could you just share with us so we can probably learn?
Absolutely. And I send it to Alison, and I also send the PowerPoint to Alison, of course, as well. And you can always link up with me on LinkedIn, and I tend to also make a bit noise about the papers we publish on LinkedIn. So thanks very much, Joan, for your questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If you're all sitting comfortably again, I think we'll kick off with the part 2 of this morning's event. So next up, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Kerry Wilson. Kerry's a reader in cultural policy in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Liverpool John Moores University. And Kerry co-leads the Social Innovation Research theme for the university's Institute for Health and Research. And Kerry's going to talk to us today about the House of Memories and the value of museums in dementia care. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, so reader in cultural policy doesn't tell you very much, does it? But basically, I lead research on the social value of arts and culture at the university. And that includes looking at the kind of health and wellbeing outcomes of taking part in different arts and cultural activities. I'm going to talk to you today about a long-term research partnership that I have with National Museums Liverpool, linked to the House of Memories programme, which is a dementia awareness programme led by NML in the city. And this is one of those. I haven't talked about this work for a while, actually, so thank you for the opportunity to do so again, because this is one of those projects and opportunities that make you want to get up and go to work in the morning. I really love this work, so I hope that comes across. Right, so House of Memories, it was launched by NML in 2012. It's quite a long-running programme now, with funding from the Department of Health at the very beginning. And it's a dementia awareness training programme that fundamentally uses museums, social history collections and objects to connect with people living with dementia through their own personal histories, their own personal stories and their community cultural heritage. So it's based loosely on reminiscence therapy techniques. The collections and objects they use to kind of prompt conversations between carers and the people that they're looking after, because we know that often some element of long-term memory is retained by people living with dementia. It was launched, it was developed kind of in conversation with the Department of Health originally for people working in health and social care sectors who might or who will encounter people living with dementia through their care work, but won't necessarily be experts in looking after people living with dementia. And it kind of responded to a perceived gap at the time on person-centred approaches to that kind of work, whereas clinical models of training and development are obviously quite clinically led, symptoms led, and not really about getting to know the person behind the diagnosis. So this is the ethos behind House of Memories. So the first programme was very much for people working in health and social care services, but now we have programmes for family carers of people with dementia, people providing voluntary services, providing support in the community for people living with dementia. So it's grown and expanded quite a lot since 2012. Fundamentally, the programme is delivered in person in museum spaces, but now the programme also includes kind of online packages that can be accessed remotely. And this is supported by a range of supplementary resources, including most significantly the My House of Memories app. So this is where the app contains kind of digitised museum objects, photographs of museum objects that are supported by narration, narrative descriptions, kind of musical soundtracks, so on, that help to prompt the conversation in different settings using museum resources. I think that's it in a nutshell. I could talk for an hour solely about what House of Memories is, so I would encourage you to have a look at NML's web pages, where you'll learn a lot more about the story of its development and the different resources that are available. I would encourage you to do that if you yourself have somebody living with dementia in your family and you're supporting them yourselves. It really is just a lovely support package available there that really plays to museum strengths in supporting people living with dementia. And for me, as somebody who's interested in how arts and culture helps us to live well, House of Memories is really unprecedented in its scale and reach as a cultural intervention in health and social care. And this is largely due to the way it's not just responded to kind of policy and the strategic development and then the need to prioritise people living with dementia in public health. It's also anticipated a lot of that prioritisation and policy initiatives. So it's very much developed in tandem with kind of national strategy around how we support people to live well with dementia, include the Prime Minister's challenge, so on different policy directives. And it's mapped very closely alongside the dementia education and training framework, for example, and kind of in parallel to public health priorities around dementia care. It's really fed into and responded to other public health strategies around how we support people to live well, preventive healthcare rather than reactive clinical intervention, including asset-based community development approaches and things like social prescribing. So it's really kind of developed in tandem with these important strategic frameworks and narratives, really. Alongside that, the arts and health field in itself has accelerated quite rapidly in recent years, and House of Memories has become a kind of best practice example of how we use arts, health and culture to support people to live well in their communities. And the team itself has played quite a formative leadership role in the development of landmark national initiatives, including, for example, the National Centre for Creative Health, which has emerged out of an all-party parliamentary group, Creative Health Inquiry, back in 2017. And so they've played quite a strategic role in the development of the field itself, and they're often kind of referred to as a lead example of how it's done well. So it's really the National Museums of Liverpool are kind of driven by social value anyway, but it's the House of Memories programme has become quite a leading example of how museums play that kind of civic, place-based cross-policy function in terms of supporting communities to look after one another and to live well before we become poorly. So it's really an important strategic example of that. And I think their attitude towards evaluation and research and development has been key in that progress and in that success, really. And I've been lucky enough to be part of that journey as a research partner since its early days. So it was launched in 2012, and then I became involved in 2013 kind of as an evaluation research partner, so helping them to look at the impact of the programme as it's been rolled out and developed in different contexts. So, for example, we've evaluated the pilot family carers model in 2017. We've evaluated different kind of regional adaptations of the programme, working in partnership with different museum and gallery services in different areas of the UK, including the Midlands and the North East. And I think we've done maybe 6 or 7 separate evaluation studies now. But on the 10th anniversary of the programme in 2020-22, I was invited to write a kind of commemorative paper that acts as a bit of a digest of the research that we've done so far.
and that's available on their website. All the research reports and evaluation reports are available on the NML website, so I'd encourage you to take a look at those as well if you're interested in the evidence of the programme and its impact. So throughout the kind of our research partnership and relationship with NML, we've come to adopt quite a consistent approach to how we evaluate the programme at different stages in its development. So we tend to use the same framework in different studies, and that includes a mixed method approach, which does include some quantitative data, but I would say mostly uses qualitative research methods. So, for example, that includes participant observation of the programme in action. We've developed a bespoke, standardised, what we call dementia care impact measure through that research, where, for example, outcomes are mapped against the policy guidelines that I've mentioned previously. So, for example, training and development outcomes in one instance were mapped against Tier 2 standards set described in the Dementia Core Skills Education and Training Framework. We include research interviews and focus groups with participants, so dementia carers who are taking part in the programme, different people who were involved in the design and facilitation of the programme as it's been developed, and commissioners where possible. And then we use, because we need to speak a strategic language as part of this programme as well, because it's often commissioned by health and social care services and providers. We use a cost benefit analysis using social return on investment approach. So that's the kind of the approach we use in a nutshell. But I thought, given our interest today, our shared interest today on qualitative research, qualitative methods in health research, I thought I'd just reflect a bit on the value of the qualitative methods that we've used throughout in terms of our research practice, how we connect to the programme as independent evaluators, how qualitative research throughout that time has really amplified carers' voices, and how qualitative research, although cost benefits sounds like a kind of economic measure that might rely on quantitative data, qualitative research plays a key role in evidencing the social value and its cost benefits at that macro kind of strategic level. So firstly, I wanted to talk a bit about what I think of the significance of participant observation. I think it's often quite an underrated research method, particularly in evaluation research. It often feels like the third wheel, something that we add into a research design or a methodological approach to kind of triangulate other more important methods. But for me, it's really a significant part of the research that we do, not just on House of Memories, but on all evaluation work related to arts and health interventions. When I talk about the work that we do on arts and health, I often describe how the impact in the room, when you're in the room, when these things are taking part, is palpable. You can really feel what it means to participants. There are often quite emotional responses that had you not been part of, you would find it very difficult to describe in an evaluation report and in an evaluation study. So I do think it's important to be part of it as much as possible. And I think when you've seen it in action and when you feel it in action, it develops your confidence as an evaluation researcher to really narrate well what the programme's real world value is. So to see it in action is absolutely key. And I think because we've developed this long term now, we've worked with NML for quite a long time now. Participant observation kind of manifests in different ways. So the team who behind House of Memories are very much included researchers as part of that, part of their own practice. So, for example, we're often invited to take part in or be part of steering group meetings and activities, so we can understand the kind of formative development of the programme as it progresses, the different stages of its development, the kind of skills and processes that go into that on an operational basis that you don't often see if you're just part of a single project, short-term project. So coming back to what Axel was saying about how we develop logic models and theories of change, it's been really vital and valuable for us to be part of that process, to understand what goes in to the programme, to then see how that informs what comes out and the outcomes that it has for people who take part. The feeling part of the team has been significant. And also in terms of that strategic delivery, really being able to understand the kind of macro level significance and importance of the project as well has come through participant observation in different activities at a strategic level. So, for example, the team have been very generous in inviting us to take part and join them in kind of quite high level roundtable discussions with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport as a supporter of the project. And it's helped us, being part of those conversations kind of has helped us to develop our own strategic language of its value and what matters in terms of how we communicate that value to people at that level. So participant observation has operated at different levels that has undoubtedly helped us to form and sustain the research partnership with NML, but also support us in our development of the research and of evidence and the impact of the programme. So I would say participant observation has been a vital part of that process throughout. And we've used obviously quite conventional qualitative methods throughout our evaluation of the programme at different stages, including interviews and focus groups, which has helped to further amplify the voices of carers in terms of the value of the programme to them, but also amplifying their voices in its ongoing and continuous development, responsive development in terms of what those communities of people need. So just to give you a flavour of the type of outcomes that we've identified, we can see real capacity building and professional development outcomes for carers and health and social care organisations and sectors. So these include a demonstrable shift in their kind of cognitive and emotional understanding of what dementia is, how dementia is a unique experience for different people experiencing it and how it presents itself, including the implications for people living with dementia and the people that live with them. We can see examples of kind of enhanced optimism in terms of the subjective well-being of carers themselves. They feel much more optimistic about their roles as carers. They feel more confident in their professional practice, and they feel more compassionate as dementia carers in terms of how they connect with the people that they meet and the people that they might be looking after. They're more conscious of their own contribution to kind of care practice and care standards within their own professional environments. They feel more able to communicate better. Their kind of behavioural attitudes towards people with dementia they're more confident in how they behave around people with dementia and the interactions that they have with them. And this all kind of represents an improved understanding of the principles and practice of real person-centred dementia care. So these are quite significant outcomes for a museum-based intervention. And this is partly because, well, mostly because from the very beginning, it's been co-produced by people living with dementia and their carers. So, for example, a service user group in the City of Liverpool helped to design the very first pilot programme that was delivered from the Museum of Liverpool in 2012. And the programme team have been closely engaged with different user groups, lived experience groups throughout its kind of evolution. And so qualitative research in terms of the impact of the programme has helped to kind of maintain and forefront their voices throughout, and in terms of what it means to them. So it's very much a co-designed approach throughout the different stages of its development and evidence of its impact. And that's been absolutely vital and helped to kind of that kind of narration of lived experience has really helped to advocate the value of the service to different commissioners and different partners as it's progressed. And finally, coming back to the kind of strategic significance of the programme, the need to kind of include a cost-benefit analysis throughout has been driven by obviously what commissioners need to be able to evidence themselves, particularly health and social care commissioners. They need to kind of justify the commissioning of a creative and cultural intervention in dementia care. So we've been very conscious of the need to speak their language throughout in terms of how we design the evaluation. and they want to prove the kind of bang for the buck in terms of the investment that's made in this kind of work, which we're very conscious of, and obviously NML are very conscious of in terms of how they've developed and been able to sustain the programme as well. So we arrived at social return on investment as a means of evidencing cost benefit analysis, because it is a more responsive, more intuitive way of providing that kind of data and that kind of evidence, because it does rely on evidence and outcomes using different methods. So qualitative research, the qualitative research that we've undertaken has been significant in terms of that cost benefit analysis process. So the way that SROI works is you identify a set of outcomes using different methodological approaches. So, for example, for us, it would be improved confidence. Dementia carers' sense of improved confidence in the work that they do. And then as part of the SROI process, we would run a stakeholder workshop whereby we would discuss these outcomes with key stakeholders who haven't been directly involved in the delivery of the programmes. For example, in the regional programmes, this might include charities related to dementia care, other health and social care providers, other arts and cultural institutions, and we would kind of debate those kind of outcomes, discuss the extent to which they would recognise them and value them in their own work. And then through that process, we would look at alternative ways in which those outcomes might be achieved with other types of intervention. And basically, there's I don't actually do the the SRI calculations. There's a way to kind of formulate the value that's generated by compared to other interventions, and we arrive at a value for every £1 invested, X amount of social value is created. And there is the SROI analysis that we've done on House of Memories has shown quite hugely positive, optimistic cost benefit outcomes for them. So, for example, for one regional programme that we did in 2014, the return on investment was for every £1 spent, £8.66 of social value is generated. And then in other versions, the kind of ratio is even higher. So this is a very persuasive kind of quite policy-friendly way of communicating value to commissioners and at that strategic level, but that has been very much informed by the qualitative methods that we've used along the way. And that's it. I may have rattled through that quite quickly. I apologise. I hope that makes sense. There's so much to say about this work. Obviously, we've worked with them for a long time, and there are different versions of evaluation research that we've done that speak to different types of outcomes and in different contexts and with different carer groups. So do take a look if you're interested. But thank you again for the opportunity to talk about this work.
Thanks, Kerry. Time for questions on your presentation now. There's one in the chat from Andrew. Andrew, do you want to ask the question rather than me read it?
Thank you. I'm just in a public space, so I won't turn my camera on. It was a great presentation. Thank you very much. I was asking about theory and how theory informed both the intervention itself in terms of supporting people with dementia and the House of Memory intervention itself, and then as well around your evaluation of it. What theory did you draw on? How did that inform your assessment of the intervention itself?
Yeah, so I think in developing the programme, it links back to kind of reminiscence therapy approaches. So how the extent to which museum objects and collections can be used in a reminiscence capacity to support people's well-being. And within that as well, within heritage studies, there's a lot of work around affect and emotion. So the extent to which using cultural heritage, the kind of positive effects of that is used, has been used in the design of the programme. Obviously, there are risk factors associated to that, so we don't want people revisiting traumatic memories. So I think the team did work with health psychologists quite a lot to develop the programme in that capacity. So that in terms of the design of the programme, different kind of theories of heritage engagement have been used. Obviously, the team could speak to that themselves. For us, so evaluation work it has to respond to the individual, what the expectations are in terms of the outcomes of the people designing, the expectations of the people designing the intervention itself, but also what the expectations have been of different commissioners for individual elements of the program design and development. So, for example, the core skills training framework was used in one case. So for example, one program is called the Pilot Train the Trainer program. So that was commissioned by Health Education England, and it was developed in collaboration with acute healthcare services. So including, for example, the Christie Hospital in Manchester, the Countess of Chester Hospital, and Arrow Park Hospital on the Wirral. And it was mapped against the core dementia education skills and training framework, because it had been commissioned specifically to support staff working in those services to develop tier 2 dementia care skills. And those tier 2 dementia care skills are very much defined by, are defined by the Dementia Core Skills Education and Training Framework. So we would design the evaluation in response to that. The extent to which the programme has helped them to develop those skills according to the framework. So that's not really a theory, but it's using a kind of policy guideline to design the evaluation, if you see what I mean. So every stage of the development and the evaluation, independent individual evaluation studies that we've done are more designed around the needs and expectations of the commissioners rather than any kind of pervasive theory, if that makes sense.
It does. That's really interesting.
Thank you. Sorry, but I completely got lost in my
not at all. The designing for the commissioners, that's such an important thing to do.
Yeah. Sorry about
that.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Kerry? Somebody's asked, Tamsin's asking for more information, if possible, on the use of participant observation in your successive studies, specifically how you collected and analysed the data.
Yeah, so to begin with, we kind of would have a kind of template. We design a template for the kind of things that we would be looking out for example, the extent to which people will actively participate or passively participate in the programme, how environmental factors like access, comfort spaces, the extent to which there is other support mechanisms in place, because it is quite an emotive process. So there will be a template for the kind of indicators and the conditions that we'll be looking out for when observing the house and memories training and practice, and we'd use that as the kind of foundations for our observation work. And then obviously once we had engaged in more sessions, and once we get more used to the programme, and I guess a little bit more intuition is used in terms of how we observe people engaging with the programme, and try and be a little less formulaic about it. But I think it was important to, because we have different team members observing different sessions as well, to start from the same kind of template in terms of what we think of being appropriate in terms of participant observation. But yeah, I can that's described in some of the reports. I can expand on that as well if you want to get in touch later.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Has anybody else got any more questions? Okay. I've just got one. It was interesting that the requirement for evidence in the social value aspect of that. your qualitative research, demonstrating the value for money of qualitative research is like a really hard thing to do. So I'd be interested in learning more about your social, your SROI technique. Yeah.
Yeah, we arrived. So we did so I developed this work while part of an organisation called the Institute of Cultural Capital. So we had a research centre at the time that had been established. It's a collaboration between LJME and the University of Liverpool, and the sole purpose of the institute was to do this kind of research, kind of evidence and the impact of arts and culture. And through an earlier project with Merthyr, the Mental Health Trust in the Liverpool City region, who themselves have been involved in cultural commission and cultural programming for quite a while, and they wanted to evidence the cost benefit of what they've been doing. We commissioned a kind of scoping study looking at the best kind of approaches to economic valuation and economic impact, and through that process, SROI was identified as the most kind of responsive and intuitive way to assess the cost benefit of this kind of intervention that is very much rooted in culture, creativity, social engagement, not the kind of typical cost benefit approaches of people come to an event, spend a certain amount of money, generate a certain amount of economic value for the host city and so on. So we decided on SROI as an approach for kind of as a suite of work that we were doing at the time, but it certainly spoke to the work of NML as a way to evaluate the cost benefit of what they're doing. And I know it's helped them enormously in terms of its development and its recommissioning and the kind of value that commissioners put on that kind of evidence. So yeah, so there is a report available that kind of reviewed the different ways of undertaking that kind of analysis that arrived at SROI being the best approach for us, which I can share as well.
Yes, please, if you could share that'd be really helpful. Thank you. So just let me introduce Professor Laura Makin. She's a Professor of Social and Ethical Aspects of Health and Medicine at Lancaster University. You're very welcome, Laura. And I believe you're going to talk to us about the Adopters Advocacy Research Project.
Brilliant, thank you. I have to say, not wanting to embarrass Kerry, but I feel I'm going to have very similar moments, potentially. The brain fog is rife, particularly as I've been awake since 5:30 this morning. So please bear with me. Thanks so much for inviting me to do this. I've been listening on and off throughout the morning, and I wonder if mine might feel a little different to what others have, the approach others have taken so far. This is very much a personal reflection, and it's about a project that we set up 2 years ago, almost to the day, and it's a project we set up called Adopters Advocacy. And so I thought I'd share some reflections, really, very personal reflections on what I've experienced as researching the hard stuff. And when I talk about the hard stuff, I'm thinking now about the hard stuff to say and the hard stuff to hear. So hopefully I've not gone too far off the brief that I was set. I was asked to talk about the impact of qualitative research, both on policy, practice, and on myself. So hopefully I've not gone too far off the brief that I was asked to share. So I'm trying to think if I can share that. There we go. So Adopters Advocacy. I'm the PI for a small research group, which is made up of clinicians and clinical psychologists, as well as early career academics. And the aim of it is really to highlight the voices and the needs of adopters without ever trying to diminish the importance of adoptees and their birth families. And we focus very broadly on adopters' mental health and their support needs. And really to bring the voices that are seldom and rarely heard into the debates, really, and to sort of start influencing that policy and practice that is supportive and beneficial to the birth families and the adoptees, as well as the adopters. Interestingly, and I think that what I found fascinating for me as a researcher and sort of being able to stand aside and reflect on this as an experience, is that we've found ourselves now working with the doctors on topics that are considered taboo, that perhaps attract stigma, maybe other negative emotions. And we try to adopt a creative approach when undertaking our research in order to facilitate and support doctors to talk about those hard bits of their experiences, really. But we never started out, that was never our intention, to really work with those adopters that feel on the margins. That was never our aspiration, although we now find ourselves very much in that space. And I think the important bit for me is that it was always about producing research that was going to be of benefit. It was going to bring about evidence-based change. It was not about finger pointing or blaming. It was about trying to bring about positive change for all involved, for all stakeholders involved. So adopters advocacy, for me, in the past 2 years, has pretty much challenged everything I thought I knew about research. So I've been doing research on sensitive research with underserved, under-researched communities for around 16 years now. And I know in academic terms that isn't that long, but I've still done it for 16 years. And so I've started out doing research on embryo donation, for example, with people who had both donated their embryos or had then received donated embryos, all the way through to organ donation, gamete donation. And I thought I'd covered some quite challenging topics. And I thought I'd kind of got this insight into doing sensitive research. And then adopters advocacy came along and it turned everything on its head. So for me, I thought we did our first project in autumn 23, and it was really an exploratory study to see if there was anybody wanting to talk about their mental health. And so it's not unusual or uncommon for adopters to experience post-adoption depression. So we talk about that. That is introduced during training and assessment processes for adopters. What is less shared and less talked about is the possibility of adopters experiencing secondary trauma, primary trauma, post-traumatic stress, compassion fatigue, burnout, etc. And I thought people might be reluctant to come and talk in a group online about their mental health, about what we thought would be a silence existed around it in the community. We thought people would want to talk about it, and they would struggle to talk about it. And it was just so the absolute opposite. We put out the call, not having any network, not really having any kind of way in, obvious way in to the adoption community in terms of local authorities or adoption post-adoption support organisations. And we knew a few people that were adopted, and so we kind of worked that way. We put out a few posts. And my God, did the adopters come, and they came in their droves, and it floored us to the point where within the first 24 hours, we thought we're going to have to go back to the Research Ethics Committee to get more, to be able to recruit all the people that have come forward. And during the Adoption Mental Health Project in autumn 23, I asked, would you have preferred this to have been done individual, like online, semi-structured interviews, face-to-face? And actually what came out is they really liked that community element. They liked the idea of getting together with other adopters that their paths might not have crossed with otherwise. And what we got at the end was emails of thanks for participating, because they really appreciated the opportunity to get together and hear the adopters' stories. And they in turn felt validated for their own feelings and their own experiences that they'd gone through. So we now have adopted this as our format. We now do autumn workshops, community building workshops, where we get people to come together across the 4 nations. We do it online for 2 hours or an hour and a half, and we don't really struggle to get the adopters, which is an absolute gift. In turn, I started out the project back in July 23, thinking that we do look at a doctor's mental health, and that would be pretty much our agenda. I had a plan for the 12 months as to what topics we might want to cover and how we might go about it. What I didn't expect was in September, when we put out the call for our first project, was that we had the doctors come forward. And it's no exaggeration to say, and to use their language, they have pleaded with us, that is their language, to do projects on particular topics, on particular aspects of the adoption experience. And I said to one person in particular in September 23, I didn't plan to do adoption breakdown. It wasn't on our agenda, but okay, I hear you. We absolutely will do adoption breakdown, but it'll be 12 months later, but we will do it. And we did stick to our word. We did do it. And in autumn 24, we did a project on adoption breakdown, a very similar format, community building workshops. We ran 9, and we spoke to just under 40 people across the 4 nations. I think what's fascinating for me is in January this year, is that we then felt things started to turn, and we then have adopters literally firing out, can you do a project on this? Can you do a project on this? And we started to realise that things were turning, like there was a clear desire for more experiences to be told. And we started to realise that we were moving into a space where we are working with adopters that they describe themselves as rarely heard and rarely seen and rarely acknowledged. And so in winter 25, we will do a project on the false allegations. So that is when adopters experience false allegations by their adopted children. So that's, whereas before, the idea of setting the research agenda might be via funders. You might see a funding opportunity and kind of go, oh yeah, I can turn on research into that. You might have yourself thinking about what's available in the literature, where the gaps, you kind of respond to that gap. Actually, I've realised that it is the adopters that are driving this research agenda. And I feel very much now that it's very much a shared ownership. This is no longer about an academic, having an idea of what projects they want to do. This is now very much a collaborative, and it's working with the 300 adopters that we have on our research network, wanting to almost, we're providing a service, which is that was never the intention. When we did the adoption mental health project in 23, we really felt the need. We really heard adopters. And one adopter said to us that when I asked what support that they would need, what support would help, one adopter quite neatly turned around and said, it would be nice if a social worker came to visit and simply asked, and how are you today? And it really hit home that it is the simple things. It doesn't have to be a grand activity costing lots of money. And we felt compelled to do something. Now, community engagement was never on agenda. That was never the plan. But we felt compelled to do something. And so in our very small way, in the only little way we could, we set up a 12-week programme for dads. What we identified in the Adopters Mental Health Project is how dads feel very overlooked, very forgotten about, neglected. When support is being designed, it is, from their perspective, it's designed with a particular adopter in mind. And what they felt very forgotten about and overlooked was this with the dads. They didn't feel that their voice was heard or their needs were being met in the current support offered. So we ran a 12-week programme. It was just at Lancaster here at the university in our health innovation campus. We had literally seed corn funding from the faculty engagement fund here. And we ran a group that met 12 dads in total. And we did a breakfast club after the school drop-off. And they had a voucher to come and get breakfast and come and sit in a private, safe space, knowing that other dads in there were also adopted dads, and if they wanted to, they could have a chat or not. And we did a pizza, so we did dinner and download, so for those dads that are working, so that they could come after work and come and have a pizza, takeaway pizza and a drink, and have a download with a psychotherapist in place in the group. And we also did a family swim day so that we could get families together, and we hired out the swimming pool so that they knew that there were going to be other families like them, and to reduce any pressure or tension that might be around any behaviour that needs sort of challenging behaviours that might arise. So we did a few activities. We did an iBike ride. We put on a photography, because people volunteered their time to come and help with the dads group. And it was all about supporting their mental health. And we made a commitment that if one dad turned up, it would still go ahead. If nobody signed up to the event, it would still go ahead. Because what we recognised for adopters is that it can be really hard to commit to something. And actually, it may be on the morning or on the evening that you suddenly decide, I am going to turn up today. I'm going to do that for me. I am going to go and meet other dads. And so we removed the need to sign up, and we said it would still run, whether you signed up or not, whether there's one person or not, it would still run. And we got 12 dads in the total in the end, and we turned it into a paper, which we've now got under review, because with just the importance of these dads wanting to contribute and feeling that there was a need for support. I thought it would be really hard to get them to talk. I thought I would need to be there to facilitate, and in the end, I was just in the way. They didn't need any help to talk and share experiences, and in the end, I just stayed outside and would just meet and greet and hand them over to the cafe in the room, and that was it. So I think I was quite surprised at the level of being compelled to actually want to do something. That was never part of the plan. And I never foresaw an engagement part to it, but it feels now very much part of what we do. I did think that we would struggle to access the hard stuff. I thought people would be really reluctant to talk. And actually, we have used really creative methods to try and access the hard stuff. I mean, the really hard stuff. When you're talking to people about, do they regret adoption? When you're asking people, would anything have made the difference? Would they still have done what they chose to do if they knew then what they now know? When you're talking about child-to-parent aggression with children under the age of 10, when you're talking about false allegations and sexualized behaviour, it isn't easy, it isn't comfortable. And so we want to find ways to help people to share their experiences. Bearing in mind, a lot of these people we speak with are sharing things with us that they haven't shared with their family, with their loved ones, their close ones, their friends, their family. And so it was really trying to get the untold. And I think what we have managed to get data-wise, and that's not wanting to be arrogant about what we're doing, it's about the courage of the adopters. I feel like it's like we're lifting the letterbox up and we're having a little peek into what's happening behind the closed doors with the data we access now. And so we've put together a Letters to You series where we've got a creative writer to take extracts from the transcripts of our data and to create a fake letter written to the social worker or to the birth parents or to the head teacher, the independent reviewing officer, the health visitor, etc., etc. And it's all woven together so that there is a clear narrative of what adopters wish that those key people knew in health, social care and in education, their friends and the family, the child themselves, what they wish they knew about how it is to be going through the adoption experience. And we're going to, the plan is that this winter, we're going to use, this autumn, I'm sorry, we're going to use these letters and these interactive narratives, which are digital, interactive experiences, stories, really, to be told, snippets of an adopter's experience. We're going to use these to try and work with people in health and social care and education and see if we can do some reflective work around their practices based on the experiences of the adopters that they've shared, to see if that can prompt a few shifts and support them to support the adopters better. So I've had to really think about, it's beyond just writing the journal. It's beyond just going to a conference. I've had to think really differently about how I can share the findings in a way that is engaging, hard-hitting, and is going to bring about change in practice, really. I think I never expected to really be in a space where we're really challenging the dominant narratives. In particular, one example of that in the moment is our child-to-parent aggression project. So we've now finished that project. We're now in the process of analysing the data and writing it up for a paper. And we have chosen to look at child-to-parent aggression for children under the age of 10. I think it's quite hard. What we found quite shocking, genuinely, in our first project was the prospect of children under the age of 10 displaying aggressive behaviour. And this is never to demonise that child, ever. It is a child in need. It's a child who's experienced trauma. But it's also for us to say, actually, there are children under the age of 10 who are displaying behaviour which adopters describe as violent or aggressive. And I think it's quite an odd space for us to exist in when you're trying to still build relationships with key stakeholders and to still go against the tide, to go against the direction of travel, and really challenge people to think, to keep an open mind and to think differently, to view what's already in place differently. I think the institutional research ethics has been such a challenge for us and for the institution in turn. You're trying to conduct research that is impactful, that is going to bring about policy and practice change. Ultimately, that's your goal. But in order for that research to be done, we've had to stretch what is a tight window, not narrow, but a tight window around risks and harms. So we're actively recruiting and engaging with people who are going to be experiencing aggression. One adopter described to us her twin girls who were 6, and she explained to us that she feels that she lives in a place of domestic violence, and domestic violence that is conducted by her 6-year-old children. And so we were wanting to actively recruit and engage with these people. And so that really sets a bit of a bar for an institution that's saying that if we believe that you or another person is at risk of significant harm, that we will then take action. We will then need to break confidentiality. Now, I'm trying to work with people who have an awful lot of mistrust of people in authority, perhaps, for what's gone before and their experiences prior to this. And we had to say, actually, we need to raise the threshold. We need to raise the bar. We need to say, actually, it is a significant risk of severe harm. And even then, it was about a conversation if we had to do that in order to support yourselves. The other bit we found really challenging is that normally on a participant information sheet or a debrief sheet, you set out what you're going to be, your sources of support are going to be. Well, when there is very little support out there, or adopters perceive that there's very little support out there, that's really hard then to get through the ethics approval, when to say, well, I can add on the Samaritans, I can add on Adoption UK, but in terms of actual change that's going to bring about change for these people in the significant harm, that's really hard to justify that. And I didn't want to also come across as being lacking credibility, or to make one case say that actually there's a lack of support and what we're trying to do is bring about support and improve support available, and then the next minute say to adopters, and here's some support, which they probably either know about already, they've tried and accessed, or it just doesn't necessarily meet the actual need. So that felt very difficult. But I'm trying to build those relationships with the research ethics committees in order to kind of allow us to still get the research done, whilst also sort of pushing and challenging their very sort of tight boundaries, their sense, their perception of what is harm and risk and benefit, and trying to encourage them to balance those three all the time. And then finally, it's challenged us with in terms of our dissemination approach to dissemination. I think there's a real sense of for an institution to go through journal publications, when actually journal publications can take anything from 12 months to 2 years, depending on which journal you go for, reviewing process, etc., open access or not. And I think we've really felt this with our mental health and support survey project that we've done. So we've had over 500 people complete our mental health and support survey. And it's basically assessing the state of mental health for UK adopters, and also looking at the support that they currently access and the support that they want. And it's a quantitative study that we've conducted. And it's trying to find that balance between actually still getting a publication to get a citation to fulfill that academic responsibility, but also wanting to bring about change and wanting to influence and feed into policy debates right now. We've had the Adoption and Special Guardian Support Fund, we've had open adoption debate. There is so many debates going on right now, and desperately wanting to get this research out there and to inform these debates, and trying to find that balance between working with the media in order to have your data shared, but also then not wanting to give too much away in order so that you don't then get out, you avoid or miss out on a publication, a journal article. It's been really hard to try and find that balance, working with the conversation or not, maybe to do a longer piece, but also then not wanting to miss a shorter, snippy piece to kind of attract the attention and get the highlights, doing stuff on LinkedIn. I think it's been really difficult, and it's an aspect I'm definitely still navigating and learning, because at this end of the day, this was more than, and it's grown arms and legs. It's become more than just an academic project now. This feels, like I said, I no longer feel I just belong, that I own this. It doesn't belong just to me now. It's also the voices of the adopters who've shared their experiences with me. So I found dissemination really quite tricky. And I've been really cautious and careful about who I work with and engage with, because I'm very mindful I don't want these voices and these experiences being used for a different purpose, a different aim, which was always about bringing positive evidence-based change that was going to benefit adopters, birth families and adoptees. So one of the things I just wanted to focus on in particular was the impact of qualitative research for people. And this was about, for the participants, I think what they've shared with me is that the impact for them has been developing a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and wanting to make a difference, and feeling that they're being able to make a difference and have an impact on the adoption community. I think people have told us as well that they feel that they've been heard without judgment or interruption. But interestingly, I've really felt that they are now utilising this research for their own goals. These adopters really are immensely passionate and have a very strong, clear direction of what they want changed. And I think they're now utilising this research space for their own ambitions. And I feel very much that they are driving it more than I am now. And I feel that they've taken control of it far more than I started out having. I think there's an impact of qualitative research on the people, the research team. And I've definitely engaged with the researchers and the transcriber very differently than I've ever done on any project before. With the researchers, I've had to make sure that I am available and around every time they've done an interview, to make sure I'm around for a debrief, just even kind of just a sharing. With the researchers who read the transcripts, who write the papers, I've had to say to them, just do one transcript at a time. Make sure you go for the dog walk. make sure you're doing something for yourself. Don't do too much in a day. It is really quite shocking. It's really hard hitting what you're going to read, and I was concerned for their own mental health, that they were actually going to try to get through it like you would do a normal project, and actually when trauma's involved, I didn't want them to feel to absorb that trauma too. So I've tried to take real care for the researchers. And interestingly, even with the transcriber, I approached the transcriber and I said, what is likely to be discussed in these transcripts, because I've actually done the data collection, and I wanted them to honestly think about whether they were in a position to take on the recording. It wasn't as straightforward as saying, oh great, you're the chief, here you go, do it. And I said to them, slow and steady, there's no rush for this with me. And the impact for myself has been really quite considerable. After the adoption breakdown project we did last autumn, I had to take 2 months off from the project. I couldn't go straight into it. I'd heard I heard too much. It was, and yet I wasn't the one living with it. But the level of grief, the trauma associated with it, after hearing just under 40 people talk about it, and we did 9 workshops, I needed to just step back before I could start with the next stage of the process, really. So I think the impact of qualitative research for policy and practice with the doctor's advocacy, it's a challenge, because I'm trying to conduct caring, slow research practices versus this real drive and ambition, both from my adopters and myself, to influence this current policy and the practice, to get it out there. And I really have this sense sometimes that people are watching and waiting for the findings to see what we produce, see what comes out. And I really want to get out there, because the debates are moving on. I don't want to be behind, don't want to lose the opportunity, but at the same time, I don't want to cause harm to my researchers, my transcriber, or myself. The researchers tell me very much about this. They describe it as this paralysing weight of responsibility. I just want to do justice. It's all they keep saying. I just want to do justice to the data. I just want to do justice to the adopters. You know, they feel such a responsibility, and it really can be quite crippling at times. And when they come to analysing the data and they can't quite see that narrative, they want to get all the data in. They want to make sure all the voices are heard. And it's sort of trying to say, we can do what we can do, at the pace that we can do it. We've already done the listening. We've already given, it's trying to help them work through that. But I can get a real sense of how paralysing it is for them. I think it is really interesting that I have, because we are challenging the dominant narratives, that it has been questioned whether I am anti-adoption. It has been questioned and queried and doubted around what are my aims with adopters advocacy, and is it that, are we putting out an unpalatable message, arguably, and that we are therefore going to stop people coming forward and wanting to adopt, which means that it has an impact on the children. And so I have had accusations of this, both verbally and in emails. And actually, it makes me very sad, because actually what we're trying to do is keep adoptive families together, so that we can reduce the amount of adoption breakdowns and adoption disruptions. And actually, one argument is that one adopter said was that the social workers shouldn't be afraid of our stories. They are success stories. And I can see what she means by that, because in many instances, people are homeschooling, they may be solo adopters, they may be experiencing child-to-parent aggression, or all of the above, and they turn up every day and go through it all again for that commitment, whether that is moral obligation, whether that is fierce love. They do it for their child or their children. And they are success stories. What we're arguing for and trying to create is a better support system for the adopters that are arguably supporting some of the most vulnerable children in our society today. So from a personal experience, I've started in a whole new research field. I never saw this coming. This was never the intention. I was on a whole field around donation studies, and I need to build a profile in this field and gain credibility, and that's hard to do. It's not easy, it's not straightforward, takes time. And I need to learn. One of the examples is that learning about the dissemination outlets, knowing which conferences to go to, knowing which journals are supportive or friendly journals for our narratives that we're trying to put out there. And that's hard to start again and be a novice again. I would ask you, I would invite you to think about what you would know about me, what you would assume about me now by doing adopters advocacy. And I think you probably would assume that I'm an adopter. I think you'd probably assume that I've had mental health challenges as a result of my adoption, my adoption experience. And it's interesting because I am an adopter, but I'm also adopted. And I think what I have experienced in the last 2 years is that I have lost my own voice. I have now become personally silenced. So when I enter into dialogues or debates or discussions with media, or if I'm fortunate enough to work with people in the Department of Education or Adoption England, for example, I am there as a researcher. And I am data driven, and I only talk about my data, and I have to make immensely clear if I'm talking about my personal experience or if I'm talking about the research. And I find myself using lots of phrases now in order to make that distinction and to very clear to separate that out. But there are debates that are going on around adoption and special guardian support fund, perhaps, or open adoption, and I might have a very different view as somebody who is adopted, as somebody who is an adoptee, and as somebody who is a researcher, and the data I have available to me. And I think on an incredibly personal note, I find myself having to wear what I call my researcher's cloak. Because when I am giving presentations or I am talking to social workers, perhaps, for example, I have to make sure that I am having the courage to keep speaking as a researcher, because I have to leave my personal at home, and I put on I'm a researcher in that environment. And it does take courage to speak in some environments where perhaps as somebody who is adopted or as an adopter, I might prefer not to be in. But I'm there as a researcher, and that's what so I put my cloak and I go and be there as a researcher like I would do it as any other researcher at any other conference. I do find it personally very hard. When we started off Adopters Advocacy, I took a year to decide whether to set it up or not, because there was implications for my children. I was essentially outing my children as being adopted. I was outing my husband as an adopter. I was outing my family, my mum and dad, because they adopted me. I was outing my brother, who's also adopted. And I needed to check in with all of them, that was all okay, that I could keep moving forward, that I could engage with the BBC News or whatever. And I had to make sure that everyone's on board with every decision that I'm making, because it all had implications for them. It also had implications for where I am right now and where they might be and we might be in years to come. Are we going to look back on this, on the presentations I give or the papers I write, and regret that? And is that going to have implications for me and for them in the future? And so I need to make sure all the time it's not straightforward for me to just go away and write a publication or to write a presentation. I have to be thinking about a lot of other people, our future selves as much as our present selves. It has been, on the one hand, absolutely glorious, because I have found other adopters, and I've definitely felt that I have found my tribe many a time. But I also have to deny an awful lot of aspects of my identity. I find people will start a conversation with me, and this is about social workers, health visitors, GPs, doctors. They'll all start a conversation with me from where they sit. So obviously, Laura, we think this. And I have to bite back my thoughts on that, my view on that, as somebody who is an adoptee, because that necessarily doesn't. I'm there as a researcher and not as an adoptee or not as an adopter, and I have to deny a lot of that when I enter into conversations. But at the same time, during the community building workshops, it has been refreshing to find other adopters and find a tribe with that. I think there's been a distancing of me, particularly in a personal circle, perhaps people at work, by doing adopters advocacy and saying talk about mental health. I think people have personally distanced themselves from me, and I do think sometimes it can be quite challenging, the perceptions that people have of me. Is this a very self-indulgent research project that I've engaged in? Is it a very selfish activity that I am doing? Surely the focus should be on the children and not on the adopters, etc. So there's been both positives and negatives for me with doing adopters advocacy. So looking ahead, final slide now. I'm continuing to grow the Adopters Advocacy Our network. We've got over 300 adopters signed up now from across the 4 nations. We continue to grow that. We've now got 6 publications in journals, in the journal publication system. We've got 3 more that are currently being written up, and we've got 5 new projects that we start to recruit in winter 2025. Although research funding is incredibly hard to find, for perhaps obvious reasons. We'll continue with our community engagement, and we hope to run another mental health programme, but this time we'll include the mums and the dads as well. I think impacting the practice and policy is going to be the hardest thing. So this autumn, I'm thinking I might not do some data collection myself, and I might actually instead focus on putting together a toolkit for health, social care and education professionals, utilising our data and our findings so far in order to bring about that to encourage reflective practices, really, to support adopters. So we might be focusing on that this autumn. Policy is the hardest bit. We have been really fortunate to be contacted by the National Strategic Lead for Adoption in England. Adoption UK has been really supportive, and like I said, the Department for Education, the Adoption Policy Unit, we've had contact with them. I'm flattered by that interest. We also have the BBC in terms of media. We've sort of arranged to sort of share. There's a lot of documentaries planned in the offing, and so we're waiting to see if that can bring about sharing our findings. But I think that impacting the policy is going to be the one that's going to be the hardest, and one that we're going to really focus on going forward once we've got the publications sorted. So for me, impactful qualitative research is it equates to being a trusted voice and gaining that credibility. I think the engagement needs to be quite creative when you're working with communities like the ones we are at the moment, but also I think the dissemination, when you're sharing this hard stuff, I think sometimes you need to be quite creative in how you access it and also how you disseminate it. And for me, I can't ever separate research, education and engagement. And so we're also looking at how we can start feeding into social work curriculums and mental and medical students' curriculums, so that we can start talking to them about adopters' mental health, so it isn't a surprise when they come across them again in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Laura, for really thought-provoking and I don't know how you do it. I really don't know how you do it.
That's really kind, Alison. Thank you.
My heart goes out to you, and thank you for doing this sort of research. There's a question in the chat about
yes. Sorry, Alison. Yes, got to look.
From Tamsin.
Yeah, bear with me, I'm just going to jump down. Thank you, Tamsin. How do you manage to negotiate the balance with the ethics committees regarding the ethics and harms you've discussed undertaking the projects, particularly at the beginning? I think that's, to be fair, Tamsin, I should probably do my conflict of interest, where I was fortunate enough to be the chair of the Research Ethics Committee, but I still had to have it independently reviewed. Of course, it wasn't like I was marking my own homework. I think it was, I think always engaging in the dialogue with Rex. I think one of the things I always appreciated with researchers is when they got in touch and actually wanted to have a conversation with me and talk me through it. I think there needs to be a mutual respect with Rex and researchers, and it's that mutual respect and a dialogue. And I think a lot of the time Rex can criticised as gatekeepers, and in my opinion, rightly so, because I much prefer working it as a partnership. So for me, it was about getting in touch with the Rex early on to say we're thinking about it, and we will do it now with the false allegations one, for example. And it's about recognising, having a very clear plan in place of that, if this is the support we've got in place for the researchers, this is the support we can realistically put in place that is realistically available to adopters engaged in this type of research. I think it was important for us to put out there, though, to the REC that they understood that this was a benefit to participants, that people wanted the opportunity to have their stories heard and told. And so we did badge that. We did really strengthen the benefits, which I probably wouldn't have done on the embryo donation project, for example, the organ donation project. But we did very clearly put up a flowchart so that there was a clear communication pathway between the researcher and myself, or if it was me doing it. And I would have the researcher also debrief me. So when I'd done my 2-hour workshop, I would then have my researcher would immediately get on touch and go, do you need to chat? How's it been? And so they were debriefing me like I was debriefing them, depending on who was doing the data collection. And then if there was something that I was uncertain about, I agreed that within the 24 hours, I would share that with the deputy chair of the REC, so that there was a clear communication pathway and there was external input into whether we needed to escalate any concerns. But all the time, it's about balancing the benefits of the research, the potential benefits coming out of the research to the participants, but also in terms of trying to change the policy and practice. We needed to hear about people with violence who experiencing aggression and now false allegations. And it was about being confident that we had things in place, and knowing when to pull the ripcord and to say, actually, this is now out of our control. There was only one person ever, and that she was sat in her car. She decided not to participate in the workshops due to the level of stress she was experiencing. And she instead allowed me to use 2 of her emails that she sent me. But I was concerned about her. I was like, bugger the research, I'm worried about you. And so I did offer her, we had a psychotherapist who volunteered her time. And so I did offer to put her in touch with that psychotherapist if she wanted to. And I also asked if she needed any legal advice. We'd have solicitors that have volunteered their time for us to work with us. So I asked if she needed any legal advice as well. And I did then check in. I'll be honest, I did then check in a week later. We didn't necessarily have to do that, but I wanted to do that. I couldn't switch off from thinking about her. And to be fair, she did say that she'd moved 300 miles away to go and stay with her family. And that was the best place for her. So I felt she was safe. Felt she had I'd done all I could at that point. But it is the projects haunt me, that they linger, but actually I'm kind of glad they are at the moment, because I think it's what's driving me. I don't want these people to be forgotten about, because they already feel quite forgotten about. So I think all I would say with the REC is just lots of engagement early on, lots of communication, early dialogue, and to make sure that you've got clear communication pathways if you are going to have to pull the ripcord and breach confidentiality.
Thank you. And there's another question. We're aware that there's support for guiding research on emotionally difficult subjects, but do you know if there's anything available in local university networks?
No, that's fascinating, and I'm so glad there is, because like I said, we're doing it between us, because we're and and we are genuinely looking out and looking after each other, but really at the cost of the research in many regards, because we're not quick with our research. Like I said, we've been going for 2 years. We've got 6 papers, but we've not got any published yet. They are in the system under review and out. But so it is at the cost of the research in some regards. But we can't do this work quick. Well, I don't think we can do it quickly anyway without causing some damage to ourselves. But I think that's I think that is there's another conference right there. There's another network there.
Definitely. And then finally, there's a question about, have you published your experiences, your own experiences?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you asked that, because I can't take credit for this. There is I found 2 wonderful articles, and they are talking about reflections of doing research that involves trauma, and then that was one in 25 come out, and then there's one about academic welfare when you're experiencing the psychological care for researchers and research ethics processes. So I thought there was those 2 that I'd come out really. So I personally haven't, but the quotes I've pulled out are from the 2 papers that I've read, because they resonated so much with me. And this is why I work with the researchers I do work with, because they are at an arm's length. They are at an arm's distance compared to me. So that's why I intentionally work with the people I do, because I just feel it is it keeps me safe. Even though I do the data collection, it keeps me safe by not having to go through all the transcripts. But then I worry about them. No, I've not published, but which is why this was a lovely opportunity for me to be able to have a reflect a bit on what it's been like for the last 2 years for me. So this has been very cathartic for me.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to have to close it now. So thank you, Laura, again for sharing what you're doing, and I think you're more than an advocate. I'd say you're an activist, yeah, in this subject. So on behalf of myself, Isla, Claire Maxwell and Kirsty Coxon, who couldn't be here today, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, and thanks particularly for our speakers, and particularly Andrea, who's joined us at 2 a.m. from Cuba. I think what we've heard today is how qualitative research can link with all kinds of different disciplines, from history, arts, museum, AI, and it can bring to life real and current issues, and how impactful that is, particularly its value in getting previously unheard voices heard, getting those issues to the fore, in dementia care, in Black maternal health, and as we've heard with the adopters, challenging those dominant narratives, and making people and challenging people to think differently and do differently. So we've got a little poll. I think Isla's going to put it in the chat, because we'd be very interested in what you thought about today, and also what you'd like us to look at in future sessions. Finally, the slides and the recording will be available on the website, on the YouTube channel in due course. So, oh, great. Isla's put the form in the chat. So if you could fill that in, that'd be great. And thank you very much. Oh, Claire, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Alison and Isla. The amount of work that takes place to set this up is quite insurmountable, and they've been absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much. I've been flying on your coattails as usual, but thank you. And you've been great today as well.
Thanks very much. Very kind. Thanks, everybody. I'll let you get off and enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers. Bye.